Welcome, dear listener, to another quiet journey into the past. You've arrived at the Sleepy Historian channel, your home for boring history for sleep, soft-spoken history documentaries, and calm bedtime storytelling. If you find peace in these gentle narratives, if the slow rhythm of the past helps you drift toward dreams, then you're in the right place. Here, we tell history sleep stories not to excite you, but to ease you into rest. Together, we'll explore forgotten corridors of time, where ancient lives once unfolded, steady and unhurried. This is relaxing history to fall asleep to, where every detail, every image, and every whispered name is shared softly, like a lullaby wrapped in memory. Tonight's tale carries us to the land of the Pharaohs. Not the golden cliches of pyramids and treasure, but the subtler truths, those jaw-dropping secrets that rarely make it into the textbooks. We'll drift through the daily lives of ordinary Egyptians, pause with the rulers whose names were carved in stone, linger over mysteries buried in desert sands, and wander among the courts and palaces where privilege and ceremony intertwined. Imagine yourself settling deeper into comfort. Perhaps your head rests against a pillow. Perhaps your room is dimly lit. Perhaps you're listening at night, or even during the day, letting the steady calm of the past carry you away. Wherever you are, you're not alone. There are others listening at this very moment, scattered across the world, also letting their minds sink into these quiet stories. If this kind of storytelling brings you peace, feel free to gently like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly helps you rest. And in the comments, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It is strangely comforting to imagine a constellation of listeners, all drifting off together, across different lands and hours, united by the stillness of the past. So, let the sands of Egypt whisper to you. Let the voices of the ancients flow softly into your imagination. There is no rush here, just stories, steady and patient, unfolding like the slow course of the Nile. Settle in, close your eyes if you wish, and let us begin. Imagine yourself stepping softly into a village along the Nile, perhaps around 1500 BCE. The day begins not with alarms or clocks, but with the slow glow of the rising sun. The river gleams in the distance, silver and gold all at once, while mist curls lightly above its surface. The air is cool, but it carries the scent of damp earth, reeds, and the faint sweetness of grain. Life here is measured by rhythms older than memory. The Nile's annual flooding is the great metronome, dictating when fields are sown, when they are harvested, and when people must wait, patient and watchful, for the waters to retreat. Imagine the villagers stirring, their homes made from mud brick, walls rough but sturdy, cool in the morning shade. A rooster calls somewhere, though its sound is softer than what you might know. Animals are present, but the village is not crowded with noise. Instead, there's a calm hum of life awakening. A woman rises and grinds grain on a flat stone, pressing and dragging until the wheat breaks into coarse flour. The sound is steady, rhythmic, almost hypnotic, the grain against stone, over and over. She mixes the flour with water to form dough, shaping it into flat loaves that will later bake in clay ovens. Bread, the daily anchor of Egyptian diets, is always being prepared. Around her, children stir, slowly awake, rubbing their eyes as they sit on woven mats. Their laughter is quiet, subdued at this early hour. The men, many of them farmers, begin their preparation for the fields. They walk barefoot through the damp soil, carrying simple tools, hoes, wooden plows pulled by oxen. The tools are basic, yet effective, and the farmers' hands are calloused from endless repetition. They know the land intimately, where the soil is richest, how deep the water lingers, how the sun shifts across the seasons. The village itself feels timeless. The houses, rectangular and modest, cluster together with narrow lanes between them. Walls are patched with fresh mud where cracks appeared, roofs of reeds, and would creak softly in the wind. There are no grand decorations here. Only utility, only what is necessary. Yet, in their simplicity, these spaces feel warm, lived in, and enduring. As the morning advances, you hear more sounds: the bray of donkeys, the chatter of women fetching water in clay jars, the rhythmic clapping of hands shaping wet clay into vessels. Pottery is everywhere, fragile but essential, and every household depends on it. Imagine yourself carrying one of those jars, heavy and cool against your skin, the water sloshing quietly inside. Meals are simple: bread, beer made from barley, onions, lentils, fish when it can be caught, and dates when the season is right. These flavors are modest, not spiced extravagantly, but familiar, nourishing, and constant. Imagine the taste of a coarse barley loaf, slightly sour, dipped into a stew thickened with beans. It is not the food of kings, but it sustains as it has for countless generations. The clothing, too, is simple: linen woven from flax, light against the heat. Men wear short kilts. Women wear sheath dresses that fall straight, sometimes with a shoulder strap. The linen is often unbleached, pale in color, though wealthier villagers might dye it lightly or decorate it with beads. The fabric feels cool, breathable, perfect for life beneath the Egyptian sun. Children play in the dust, inventing games with sticks, pebbles, and small toys carved from wood. Their laughter rises now and then, though even in play the sound is soft, absorbed by the open air and the steady hum of village life. Pets are not unknown. Cats curl themselves lazily near doorways. Dogs wander between homes, sometimes chasing after flocks of geese that scatter noisily in protest. Religion, too, permeates every corner of life. Small household shrines hold figures of protective gods and goddesses. Bes, who wards off evil. Tarit, the hippopotamus-shaped goddess of childbirth and fertility. Incense may burn faintly, filling the air with a warm, resinous aroma. Villagers whisper prayers in the morning, asking for health, for protection, for the river to flood as it should. Imagine lying in the shade of one of these homes, listening. The world is unhurried, every action steady, practiced, and familiar. The villagers are not idle, yet their pace is slower than modern life, dictated by nature rather than by the urgency of machines or schedules. It is a world both fragile and enduring, shaped by necessity but softened by repetition. As the sun climbs higher, the village stirs fully to life. Children run errands, carrying baskets of vegetables. Farmers make their way further into the fields. Fishermen push small reed boats into the river, casting nets with practiced motions. Life here is work, constant and consuming, yet also bound together by community. Each person knows their role, their place in the rhythm. Close your eyes, if you wish, and imagine yourself here, surrounded by the sounds of a world that no longer exists. The scrape of stone on grain, the rustle of reeds, the distant calls of birds circling above the river. The day moves forward gently and without urgency, as it always has. The sun has now risen higher over the Nile, casting a gentle brilliance across the water. The mist has long burned away, and the landscape lies open, warm and golden. While much of Egypt's life revolves around farming, not all villagers spend their days in the fields. The towns and villages pulse with craftspeople, tradesmen, and laborers who keep the wheels of daily existence turning. Step into a small workshop. The space is little more than a shaded alcove beneath a mud brick wall. Yet inside, a potter shapes clay into form. His hands move with a practiced steadiness, turning the wheel with his feet, guiding the wet clay into jars, bowls, and cups. The smell of damp earth rises in the heat, mingling with the faint smoky tang of a nearby kiln. Pottery is not glamorous, yet it is vital. Every household needs jars for water, bowls for meals, vessels for storing grain and oil. His work, while humble, sustains the rhythm of community. Nearby, a carpenter bends over a plank of acacia wood. Wood is scarce in Egypt, often imported or carefully preserved, but its uses are many. With simple tools of copper and bronze, he carves shapes that will form furniture, door frames, or perhaps even a coffin. The sound of chisel against wood is measured and calm. Each stroke is deliberate, never rushed, for the material is precious and must not be wasted. Imagine the faint scent of resin, sharp and sticky, mixing with the dry air. Across another lane, a scribe sits cross-legged with a reed brush in hand. His task is unlike that of the craftsman, yet no less important. He copies records on a papyrus, his writing steady and precise. Lists of grain deliveries, accounts of laborers, contracts for land, all are preserved in ink. His world is quieter, filled with the soft scratch of reeds on papyrus. For him, words are as tangible as clay or wood, shaping not objects but order itself. The life of a scribe carries prestige, yet also monotony. Hours stretch long, the body stiff from sitting, the mind lulled into repetition. Even here, the rhythm of labor is hypnotic. Markets, too, are alive with small exchanges. Imagine narrow stalls beneath woven mats that shield the sun. Women trade baskets of onions for fish, or a small jug of beer for a handful of dates. The marketplace is not loud in the way of modern cities. It is alive, yet calm, the voices carrying in soft conversation rather than sharp cries. Chickens cluck, donkeys shuffle, but even in the bustle there is patience. Transactions unfold slowly, without urgency. Fishermen return from the Nile, their reed boats bobbing softly along the current. Nets heavy with fish are spread out to dry. The smell of the river clings to the air, mud, waterweed, the faint musk of fish, but here, too, it is a normal presence, never overwhelming, never strange. Children run to watch, eyes wide as baskets fill with the day's catch. These meals, though modest, add variety to the bread and beer that dominate Egyptian diets. Imagine yourself walking slowly down a sunlit lane, past the walls of houses patched with fresh mud. On one side, a woman kneads dough. On another, a weaver works at a loom, her hands darting back and forth, pulling threads into patterns. Linen, the common fabric, is born here, strand by strand, woven into sheets that will become clothing or shrouds for the dead. The weaver hums softly, the sound carrying into the warm air like a faint lullaby. Life is rarely idle. Labor takes many forms, some physical, some mental, some artistic. A stonecutter chips at limestone blocks, preparing materials for buildings. His hammer strikes rhythmically, a hollow sound that echoes faintly down the lane. The stones he shapes may one day form a temple wall or a tomb, but for him, they are simply today's task. Step by step, stroke by stroke, the stone yields to human patience. There are moments of pause, too. In the heat of midday, people retreat into shaded interiors. Walls of mud brick hold the coolness, and mats are laid on the ground for rest. A jug of beer, thick and slightly sour, is passed among family members. Dates are shared, their sweetness cutting through the heaviness of grain-based meals. Children nap in corners, curled on mats, while older members of the household sit in quiet conversation. Imagine yourself lying in such a space, the world hushed around you, the hum of labor pause for the hottest hours. Outside, the sun beats down relentlessly, but inside, shadows create pockets of relief. Time seems to slow further, if that is even possible. The minutes drift by like the current of the Nile itself, measured, steady, unstoppable. In the evening, as the heat softens, life resumes again. Fishermen mend nets, potters check kills, and farmers return with weary but steady steps. Villagers gather near thresholds, exchanging news in gentle tones. Smoke rises from clay ovens, carrying the smell of baking bread into the air. The village glows in the amber light of sunset, every wall, every rooftop painted in soft gold. It is a world not free of hardship, disease, hunger, and the weight of labor are constants, but is also a world where every detail is tied to survival and continuity. Nothing is wasted. Every grain of wheat, every scrap of linen, every vessel of water is precious. And in that necessity, there is a rhythm, calm, measured, and unchanging, that shapes the heart of Egyptian daily life. Close your eyes, if you wish, and imagine the slow unfolding of this day, one among countless others. The work of hands, the sound of tools, the soft hum of conversation, all blend into a steady background, like the river itself, always moving, always the same. As the long Egyptian day moves toward evening, the landscape softens once again. The heat fades slowly, and the colors of the sky change from the brilliance of gold to muted rose, then to a deeper violet. Shadows stretch across the village lanes, and the Nile glimmers like polished bronze in the last light of the sun. This is the time when daily labor eases and households turn inward. Imagine yourself seated near the doorway of a mud brick home. The air is cooler now, carrying the fragrance of smoke from clay ovens. Loaves of bread, freshly baked, are drawn out carefully with wooden paddles. Their crusts crackle faintly as they cool, releasing a warm, nutty aroma that blends with the sharper scent of onions frying nearby. Small clay lamps are lit, their flames flickering gently, casting a soft, golden glow against the walls. Families gather together in the dim light. The meals are humble yet filling. Bread torn into pieces, dipped into stews thickened with lentils or beans. Beer, served in small jars, is sipped slowly, its texture cloudy, its flavor earthy and sour. Sometimes there is fish, sometimes figs or dates to sweeten the palate, but often the food is modest, predictable, and steady. It is not luxury, yet there is comfort in its familiarity. Children's voices rise more now, no longer subdued by the heat of the day. They chatter and laugh, sometimes mimicking the chants of priests or the instructions of farmers. Their games spill into the open air, running, tumbling, tossing pebbles, or carved toys back and forth. Cats weave silently among them, tails curling in the lamplight, while dogs bark softly at shadows along the lanes. Geese, restless in their pens, honk in protest as the children stir too near. The evenings are also times for community. Neighbors sit outside their doors, talking in quiet voices, exchanging news about crops, about family health, about the shifting moods of the river. The talk is unhurried, with long pauses between words, as if speech itself is part of the rhythm of life. Some women weave reeds into mats while they talk, their hands moving even as their voices drift softly in the night air. The sound of insects rises, a steady chorus that fills the pauses. Religion, too, lingers in the domestic sphere after dark. Small household shrines glow faintly with offerings, bread, beer, or a single flower left for the gods. Children may whisper prayers before sleep, their words simple but heartfelt. To them, the divine is not distant, but woven into every part of the world, in the river, in the fields, in the stars overhead. Even in the humblest homes, the sense of connection to greater forces remains constant. Now and then, festivals punctuate the routine. Imagine the village during one of these occasions, when processions form and music drifts into the evening sky. Sistrums shake, drums beat softly, and voices rise and chant. The air is alive with incense, thick, resinous, slightly sweet, and with the flicker of torches. Yet even here, though the occasion is festive, the pace is unhurried. It is celebration, yes, but never chaos. The songs repeat, hypnotic, comforting, like waves lapping against the riverbanks. Night in Egypt brings both relief and vulnerability. The coolness is welcome after the unrelenting sun, but darkness carries its own dangers. Scorpions hide in cracks, jackals prowl at the edges of villages, and the wide sky is filled with unfamiliar sounds. Yet people feel protected, not only by their neighbors, but by the gods they believe watch over them. Doors are closed, mats rolled out, and children are tucked onto woven bedding. Cats curl near doorways, guardians against rodents. The silence of night deepens, broken only by the soft murmur of crickets, the distant croak of frogs, and the rustle of reeds stirred by wind. Imagine yourself lying in such a room, the walls rough but cool, the floor firm beneath the woven mat. A small lamp flickers nearby, its flame dancing in the draft. The smells of the day linger: bread, smoke, earth, river water, but they fade slowly into a muted haze. Outside, the stars shimmer with impossible clarity, their patterns already ancient in the eyes of these people. The same constellations that guide your gaze now once guided their prayers, their journeys, their dreams. There is no hurry here. The day closes as gently as it began, with repetition, with patience, with rhythms so deeply ingrained they almost feel eternal. The people of this world did not think of their lives as history. They thought only of living, of surviving, of honoring gods and kin. Yet in their constancy, in their quiet routines, they left behind an enduring record, a way of life that continues to whisper to us thousands of years later. Close your eyes, if you wish. Feel the coolness of the night air. Hear the low sounds of insects. Smell the faint smoke of clay lamps. The Nile flows quietly in the distance, as steady as sleep itself. You are safe here, among the villagers of ancient Egypt, resting beneath the stars that have always watched over humanity. Imagine now that we leave behind the quiet hum of village life and step slowly into the world of the kings. The pharaohs of Egypt were both rulers and symbols, living embodiments of divine order. Their names were carved into stone, their images painted across temple walls, their lives stretched into legend. And yet, beneath the grandeur, they too were human, born into families, raised in palaces, taught to read, to worship, and to rule. Let us linger for a while with one such figure, Amenhotep I, a pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. His reign is not as widely spoken of as those of his more famous successors. Yet his story reveals much about what it meant to be king in Egypt. He ascended the throne around 1525 BCE, inheriting not only power, but the weight of expectation. Imagine him as a young man, walking barefoot on polished stone floors within the palace at Thebes. The air inside is cool, shaded by columns painted with lotus blossoms and papyrus stalks. Servants move quietly, carrying trays of food, arranging clothing, preparing scrolls. His childhood would have been steeped in ritual, priests chanting hymns at dawn, the smell of incense rising into vast halls, the distant sound of drums echoing from temples. Every day, he was reminded of his role, not just as ruler of people, but as mediator between gods and humanity. Even his games as a boy might have reflected future duties, with miniature chariots, carved animals, and board games like Senate teaching patience and strategy. Imagine the education of this young pharaoh. Tutors teaching him to read hieroglyphs, his reed brush tracing careful signs onto shards of pottery. Lessons in history, in ritual, in the proper performance of offerings. His ears would be filled with tales of ancestors, how they conquered lands, honored the gods, built monuments. His young mind, impressionable yet focused, absorbed the weight of tradition like stone absorbing sunlight. As pharaoh, Amenhotep, I inherited a stable kingdom. The previous generation had expelled foreign rulers, restored Egypt's independence, and rebuilt its pride. His role was to preserve that balance. And so, much of his reign was marked not by upheaval, but by careful stewardship. He ordered temples to be repaired, shrines to be built, and rituals to be performed with precision. Imagine him standing at dawn before the temple of Ammonius, offering incense, the smoke curling upward as sunlight struck the stone walls. The moment is quiet, serene, yet filled with symbolic power. His military campaigns were modest compared to others, aimed at securing Egypt's borders rather than expanding them aggressively. Soldiers marched under his command into Nubia and Libya, returning with spoils and captives. But these events were more practical than spectacular. His focus remained on consolidating rather than conquering, on nurturing stability rather than chasing glory. It was in religion and culture that his reign left its deepest mark. Amenhotep, I was remembered for his devotion to the god Ammonius, whose temples rose in Thebes, the city that became the spiritual heart of the new kingdom. He also played a role in organizing royal burials in a new way, shifting toward what would eventually become the Valley of the Kings. His own tomb has never been conclusively identified, a quiet mystery that lingers still, though his mummy was discovered centuries later, carefully rewrapped and hidden away by priests who sought to protect it from thieves. Picture the young pharaoh in a ceremonial procession. He wears a linen kilt, simple yet gleaming, and upon his brow rests the uraeus, the cobra's symbol of protection. He walks slowly, accompanied by priests carrying sacred barks upon their shoulders. Music fills the air, the deep pulse of drums, the metallic clatter of sistrums, the steady chant of voices praising Ammonius. The procession winds through Thebes, where citizens bow and watch in hushed reverence. For them, the pharaoh is more than a man. He is a bridge between human and divine, a figure whose presence maintains cosmic balance. Yet, in private, perhaps he was quieter. Imagine him walking along the gardens of his palace, shaded by sycamores and palm trees. The air smells of lotus blossoms floating in pools, of herbs cultivated for ritual and medicine. Birds flit between branches, their cries sharp against the stillness. Here, away from ceremony, the pharaoh may have reflected on his role, not just as a king, but as a guardian of tradition, a man whose actions would echo long after his own life faded. His reign lasted little more than 2 decades, yet in that span, his memory was secured. After his death, Amenhotep I was deified, worshipped as a protective god of Thebes. Imagine villagers centuries later offering prayers to his spirit, believing that even in death, he watched over them. It is a curious fate. A man who lived quietly as pharaoh, remembered forever as a divine protector. Close your eyes, if you wish, and picture the calm persistence of his life. Not marked by drama, but by repetition, ritual, and duty. In that steadiness lies its power, like the Nile itself. Constant, nourishing, unchanging. In the great palaces of Thebes, life followed a careful rhythm, unfolding with the same precision as the rising of the Nile. To imagine the daily life of Pharaoh Amenhotep is to picture a world that balanced grandeur with quiet repetition, ceremony with stillness. Each day was structured not only by the needs of governance, but by the unchanging cycle of ritual. Dawn began with purification. Servants and attendants, moving in silence, prepared the pharaoh for the day. A basin of cool water was brought, drawn from the Nile and blessed by priests. Lotus petals floated upon its surface, their fragrance subtle yet steady. The young pharaoh would cleanse himself, lifting water over his face, chest, and arms, an act that carried both physical refreshment and spiritual meaning. Clothing was then chosen. Fine linen, crisp and white, woven so sheer it seemed almost weightless. The act of dressing was ceremonial in itself, for Pharaoh was not merely a man, but the vessel of kingship. Breakfast, too, was modest. Flatbread still warm from clay ovens, honey drizzled upon figs, cool beer brewed from barley, perhaps roasted duck or fish seasoned with herbs. He ate slowly, seated within a shaded hall where painted columns rose like forests of stone. Outside, the world was stirring. Workmen already heading to quarries, farmers tending cattle, priests chanting morning hymns. Within the palace, the air remained serene, broken only by the sounds of serving vessels being placed carefully upon low tables. After nourishment came governance. Scribes entered with papyrus scrolls, their heads bowed, their voices measured as they read reports. Matters of tribute, of construction, of trade, all required the pharaoh's attention. He listened in stillness, his words few but final. A nod, a short phrase, a mark of approval was enough to set decisions into motion. His presence alone carried authority. The scribes departed as quietly as they had come, their scrolls now inscribed with the pharaoh's will. Then came the rituals. At the great temple of Ammonius, priests awaited his arrival. Imagine the pharaoh stepping into the morning light, accompanied by attendants holding palm fans and standards. The temple doors opened with weighty creaks. revealing halls that smelled of incense and resin. Walls towered around him, carved with images of gods, of kings, of cosmic balance. At the sanctuary, he made offerings, bread, wine, incense, the smoke curling upward to touch the hidden statue of the god. The act was not symbolic alone, it was essential. For an Egyptian belief, without daily offerings, the gods themselves would wither, and with them, the stability of the cosmos. By midday, when the sun hung high above the Nile, the pharaoh often retreated into shaded gardens. Pools reflected the sky, their surfaces broken only by the drifting of lotus blossoms. Palm trees swayed gently in the warm breeze. Birds perched upon stone balustrades, their feathers bright against the pale stone. Here, beneath sycamores and tamarisks, Amenhotep might walk slowly, accompanied by trusted officials or perhaps alone in contemplation. The rustle of leaves, the hum of insects, the rhythm of footsteps upon gravel, all became part of the palace's living music. Meals were shared again in the afternoon. Roasted meats, onions, leeks, cucumbers, and pomegranates graced the tables. Jugs of wine cooled in clay jars, their surfaces damp from the touch of water. The pharaoh's family may have joined him, children playing nearby, laughter softening the solemnity of rule. Though paintings often depict pharaohs as stern and distant, in these private moments he was father, son, husband, human roles set against divine responsibility. Evening approached with quiet processions. The sun god Ra was honored as he sank beyond the horizon, and lamps were lit within the palace halls. The glow of oil flames flickered upon painted walls, making gods and symbols seem alive. Musicians played softly, harps, flutes, and lyres weaving gentle patterns in the air. Dancers moved in slow arcs, their bodies illuminated by firelight. The pharaoh sat in calm repose, observing, listening, perhaps reflecting on the unbroken chain of rulers who came before him. Night descended, bringing stillness. The palace darkened, its courtyards now filled with the cool breath of the desert. Stars emerged above Thebes, glittering like a river of light flowing across the heavens. For the pharaoh, this celestial river was no mere beauty. It was the path of the gods, the eternal cycle mirrored in the Nile itself. As he lay upon a bed of carved wood and linen sheets, the world continued beyond the walls. Priests kept watch in temples, guards patrolled the city gates, and the Nile moved onward, tireless, eternal. In this rhythm, one sees not only the life of a ruler, but the character of Egypt itself. The palace was not just a dwelling. It was the beating heart of tradition, its every chamber echoing with ritual and memory. And through it all, Amenhotep, I remained steady, a figure both mortal and divine, whose days unfolded with the constancy of the rising and setting sun. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the flow of that life. The rustle of linen garments, the murmur of scribes, the echo of drums within temples, the hush of gardens beneath a star-filled sky. A life of repetition, yet never monotony, a life where order itself was sacred. When one considers the reign of Amenhotep I, it is not only the rhythm of his daily life that lingers, but the way in which his presence stretched beyond his lifetime. In the Egyptian view, a pharaoh did not simply live and die. Instead, he existed in three dimensions. As a mortal man of flesh and bone, as a divine ruler whose authority echoed through temples and inscriptions, and as an eternal spirit destined for the afterlife. His death, like his life, was surrounded by ritual. The body of the pharaoh was prepared with utmost care, for it was believed that the preservation of flesh was inseparably tied to the preservation of the soul. Priests washed the body in sacred water, reciting words that had been spoken for centuries. Oils and unguents, heavy with fragrance, were applied to the skin. Linen wrappings, countless in number, were bound carefully, layer after layer, until the man became something more, no longer a king in the present world, but a figure prepared for eternity. The tomb prepared for Amenhotep I was hidden away in the cliffs near Thebes, carved deep into the rock. These tombs were not merely resting places. They were architectural prayers. Painted walls depicted journeys into the afterlife, filled with boats that sailed on heavenly waters, protective deities warding off dangers, and offerings of food and drink meant to sustain the pharaoh for eternity. Each hieroglyph was more than decoration. It was a spell, a safeguard, a promise. His sarcophagus, carved from stone, bore inscriptions of divine names and protective spells. Within it, the pharaoh lay surrounded by amulets, scarabs, eyes of Horus, ankhs, all tokens of protection. Gold, lapis, carnelian, stones chosen not for beauty alone, but for their symbolic strength. The tomb was sealed with solemn ceremony, its entrance hidden and guarded, for to disturb a pharaoh's rest was to invite disorder into the cosmos. Yet for Amenhotep I, something unusual followed. Long after his burial, his memory lingered in ways that few rulers achieved. He was honored not only as a king of the past, but as a protective figure in the present. Centuries after his death, workmen who built tombs in the Valley of the Kings prayed to Amenhotep I. They carved small stelae to him, asking for guidance and blessing. His image, serene and youthful, was revered as a patron of the necropolis. He became, in essence, a guardian pharaoh, watching over those who labored in service of the dead. This devotion set him apart. While many pharaohs faded into the shadows of history, Amenhotep's presence lingered with intimacy. His reign, though not marked by vast conquests or upheavals, was remembered for stability, order, and devotion to tradition. In a land where chaos was always feared, stability itself was a victory. His afterlife, in memory and reverence, reflected that same stability. To imagine his legacy is to picture the artisans in Deir el-Medina, the village of tomb builders, lighting small lamps in their homes and whispering prayers to Amenhotep I before sleep. It is to picture priests reciting his name centuries after his burial, as though he still walked among them. His spirit, they believe, could hear, could intercede, could protect. And beyond the devotion of his people lay the cosmic journey. According to Egyptian belief, the pharaoh, in death, became one with the gods. At night, he joined Ra in sailing through the underworld, fending off chaos, ensuring that the sun would rise again. By day, he dwelled in the eternal fields of reeds, where the Nile stretched forever, where grain grew tall, and where life was free from hardship. There, Amenhotep, I was no longer burdened by governance, no longer constrained by ritual, but simply part of eternity's rhythm. For those who stood before his tomb, perhaps centuries later, the stillness of the cliffs themselves seemed to hold his memory. The desert wind whispered against stone walls, carrying echoes of prayers long past. The stars above the valley shone as they always had, indifferent yet constant. And within, deep in the hidden chambers, the pharaoh lay at rest, wrapped in linen, accompanied by spells, his name inscribed for eternity. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine walking into that silent valley at night. The cliffs loom dark, the air cool, the path lit only by starlight. Somewhere beneath the rock lies a king, wrapped not only in linen, but in memory, in reverence, in hope. It is a reminder that history is not always written in wars and triumphs. Sometimes, it is written in the steady devotion of those who remembered, in the quiet prayers whispered long after the world has changed. Amenhotep I's story, from his daily rituals to his eternal rest, is less about grandeur than about continuity. It is about the rhythm of Egypt itself, the belief that order must be maintained, that names must be remembered, that the passage from life to death is not an ending, but a transformation. In this, his reign stands as a quiet testament that stability, ritual, and reverence can themselves be as enduring as any monument carved in stone. And so, his biography is not simply a record of reign, but a thread woven into the fabric of Egyptian history. A thread that stretches across centuries, connecting king to workman, temple to tomb, life to eternity. The Valley of the Kings lies beneath a barren sweep of limestone cliffs, a place where silence dominates and time seems suspended. To walk here, in the imagination, is to step into a landscape designed to conceal as much as to reveal. Beneath the pale earth stretch corridors, chambers, and vaults, tombs carved in secret, meant to last forever, yet constantly threatened by theft, erosion, and the curiosity of later ages. It is in this valley, near Thebes, that pharaohs of the New Kingdom built their eternal homes. Amenhotep I himself was among the earliest rulers to be associated with these hidden tombs, though his final resting place has remained an enigma. Archaeologists have searched, debated, and theorized, yet the precise location of his burial is still uncertain. Some claim it lies beneath the cliffs, sealed so well it has evaded detection. Others suggest his mummy was moved in antiquity, hidden away to protect it from thieves. This mystery has given rise to a quiet fascination. Imagine standing at the mouth of a tomb, torchlight flickering against walls painted with ochre and lapis, the air cool and dry, thick with the dust of centuries. The silence presses close, broken only by the crunch of sand underfoot. Every corridor feels like a question. What lies beyond the next corner? What knowledge has been preserved, and what has been lost forever? The tombs themselves were more than burial chambers. They were visions of eternity, carefully constructed to mirror the journey of the soul. Corridors descended deep into the earth, symbolizing the passage into the underworld. Walls glowed with scenes of the Book of the Dead, showing Pharaoh accompanied by gods, sailing on solar boats, confronting guardians, and passing through gates. Each chamber was a chapter of the eternal story, a script written in stone and pigment. Yet for all their grandeur, these tombs were vulnerable. Ancient robbers often broke through walls and seals, drawn by gold and precious stones. Priests, recognizing this danger, sometimes removed royal mummies from their original resting places, concealing them in hidden caches. Such was the fate of many kings, whose bodies were discovered together in later centuries, laid side by side, stripped of treasures, yet preserved in dignity. The tomb of Amenhotep tells a story within this broader tale of mystery. His mummy, unusually, was never unwrapped in modern times. When it was studied with modern technology, researchers found the wrappings intact, as though the pharaoh still slept, untouched by human hands for thousands of years. Within those wrappings lay secrets, not only of a single king, but of the techniques, beliefs, and reverence that surrounded death in Egypt. It was as if even in the realm of archaeology, Amenhotep remained protected, shrouded in silence. This preservation speaks to the reverence with which he was remembered. Other mummies were unwrapped, examined, cataloged. But his, perhaps by design or perhaps by chance, was spared that intrusion. To look upon the scans of his form is to see a face serene, the features of a man who lived and ruled 3.5 millennia ago. It is a face that bridges time, connecting the viewer not to a relic, but to a human presence. And so the valley itself becomes more than stone and silence. It becomes a puzzle, one where absence speaks as loudly as discovery. Each sealed door, each unexplored crevice, holds the possibility of revelation. Each chamber reminds us that ancient Egypt was a civilization devoted to memory, yet one that concealed its truths with deliberate care. For the listener drifting toward rest, let the valley unfold gently in your mind's eye. Picture the cliffs rising pale in moonlight, their ridges casting long shadows. Imagine yourself walking through the dry air, each step slow, each breath steady. The air is still, the ground firm, the stars stretching overhead in quiet watch. Somewhere beneath your feet lies a secret chamber, hidden and waiting. Perhaps it will never be found. Perhaps that, too, is part of its mystery. The hidden tombs remind us that history is not only what has been revealed, but also what remains just beyond reach. It is in the balance between knowledge and silence, discovery and concealment, that the fascination endures. And for Amenhotep The enigma of his burial only deepens the sense that his reign was one of continuity, steady in life, preserved in death, remembered in mystery. The ancient Egyptians believed that death was not an ending, but a threshold. To cross it required care, precision, and a harmony between the physical and the spiritual. For this reason, the rituals surrounding burial became among the most elaborate in human history. Every step was part of a sacred process, meant not only to preserve the body, but also to prepare the soul for its journey through eternity. Imagine a chamber in Thebes, its walls hung with linen, its air heavy with the scent of resin and incense. Within, priests move with deliberate calm. Each gesture is performed not in haste, but in solemn rhythm, echoing words recited countless times before. The body of the deceased pharaoh, washed in water drawn from the Nile, lies upon a wooden bier. The preparation begins slowly, layer by layer, each action accompanied by prayer. Resins were warmed, their fragrance filling the chamber. Cedar oil, myrrh, and frankincense, all substances that both preserved and sanctified, were brushed across the skin. Amulets were placed carefully upon the body, a scarab at the heart, symbol of rebirth, an eye of Horus for protection, an ankh, the sign of life itself. These were not trinkets, but sacred instruments, believed to shield the soul from harm as it passed through the underworld. The wrapping itself could take weeks. Linen strips, thousands of them, were bound around the body, each section wrapped with murmured words. Fingers, toes, limbs, and torso were covered individually before the final layers enclosed the form completely. To the listener, imagine the sound. The faint rustle of fabric, the soft chant of a priest, the occasional crackle of oil lamps. A stillness permeated the space, as though time itself had slowed in reverence. The opening of the mouth, ritual, was the final act of sacred preparation. A priest, often wearing the mask of Anubis, the jackal god of the dead, would touch the mouth of the mummy with a ceremonial tool. This was not symbolic alone. It was believed to restore the senses so that the deceased could breathe, speak, and eat in the afterlife. The calm repetition of this rite underscored the Egyptian conviction that death was only a pause before renewal. Once prepared, the pharaoh was placed within coffins, sometimes nested one inside another, each layer painted with protective spells and divine imagery. The outer sarcophagus, hewn from stone, bore inscriptions that named the king and called upon gods to guard him. Sealed within, he became both hidden and preserved, entrusted to the care of eternity. But the burial was not complete until offerings were made. Food and drink were placed in abundance. Bread, beer, meat, fruits, vegetables, all set within jars and baskets. Shabti figurines, small servants carved from wood or faience, were placed to accompany the pharaoh, ready to labor on his behalf in the fields of the afterlife. To the Egyptians, eternity was not idleness, but a continuation of life, requiring labor, sustenance, and protection. These offerings ensured that all would be provided. The procession to the tomb was itself a ritual. Priests walked in silence. Women raised laments in carefully measured cries, and incense burned in clay burners. The tomb entrance, carved into cliff or valley floor, awaited with solemn patience. Inside, the air was cool, the walls painted with images of gods and journeys. Torches flickered, casting moving shadows upon scenes of boats sailing across celestial waters, or of Pharaoh being welcomed by Osiris, lord of the underworld. When the body was placed within the tomb, final prayers were spoken. Seals of clay and rope were pressed upon doors, marked with protective signs. The entrance was hidden, sometimes blocked by stone, sometimes camouflaged against the cliff. Silence descended, and the pharaoh entered eternity. Outside, the valley lay quiet, the cliffs indifferent yet timeless, holding within them the sum of generations. From modern minds, these rituals may seem distant, yet their essence is familiar. The desire to remember, to protect, to hope that what lies beyond is not emptiness but continuity. The Egyptians, with their careful preparation and endless devotion, remind us that to them, death was not darkness, but a passage into light. Close your eyes and picture the scene. The flicker of oil lamps in a narrow corridor, the faint perfume of resins, the steady movement of linen strips as they are wound. The rhythm of hands and voices becomes like a lullaby, guiding not only a pharaoh into eternity, but guiding you, too, gently toward rest. The world of ancient Egypt is both familiar and distant. We know its monuments, its pyramids and temples, its statues gazing across millennia. Yet even with centuries of study, the Egyptians remain veiled in mystery. Much has been discovered, but more has been lost, and what survives often raises as many questions as it answers. This is especially true when we consider their beliefs about eternity. To the Egyptians, life was a cycle that never truly ended. The rising of the Nile, the path of the sun, the turning of the seasons, all were patterns that reflected the human journey. Death, then, was simply a shift in that rhythm. The afterlife was not a distant, unfamiliar realm, but a perfected version of the world they knew. It was called the Field of Reeds, a place where the Nile flowed endlessly, where crops grew in abundance, where families were reunited, and where labor was light and joyous. This vision of eternity was supported by ritual and text. The Book of the Dead provided spells to guide the soul through the perils of the underworld. The deceased would stand before Osiris, heart weighed against the feather of truth. If balanced, the soul passed into bliss. If not, it was lost to oblivion. Yet even this judgment was presented not with terror, but with calm inevitability. Egyptians prepared for it with care, placing their trust in ritual, in memory, and in the gods. Archaeology has uncovered fragments of these beliefs in tomb paintings, papyri, and funerary objects. We can see, still today, the serene blue of a painted river, the golden glow of Ra's solar boat, the steady hand of a scribe who copied spells onto a scroll meant to last forever. Yet we cannot hear the exact tones of the chants, or smell the incense as it burned, or feel the cool stillness of a chamber as mourners stepped away. Those sensory details remain beyond reach, reminding us that much of Egypt lies in silence. Even the tombs themselves conceal questions. Many pharaohs have been found, their mummies preserved, their treasures cataloged. Others remain missing, their burial places hidden in cliffs or perhaps destroyed by time. For Amenhotep I, the enigma endures. Where was his original tomb, and why was his mummy relocated? Was it priests seeking to protect him from robbers? Was it the devotion of later generations, ensuring his eternal safety? Archaeology offers theories, yet certainty continues to elude us. There's also the mystery of memory itself. Why was Amenhotep, I remembered so vividly by workmen centuries later? What was it in his reign that inspired devotion, long after other kings had faded? Perhaps it was the stability he represented, the calm continuity of his rule. Or perhaps, as some suggest, it was the belief that his spirit truly lingered, offering protection to those who invoked his name. In this way, archaeology reminds us that history is more than stone and artifact. It is also belief, memory, and silence. For every object uncovered, there are countless others that remain buried. For every tomb explored, there are chambers still sealed. And for every text translated, there are fragments too damaged to read. The Egyptians themselves seem to anticipate this, weaving secrecy into their culture, hiding their dead in valleys meant to confuse and protect. To the listener, allow yourself to imagine drifting through such a hidden passage. Your steps echo faintly on stone, the air is cool, and your torch flickers upon faded colors. You know that countless others once walked here, yet now you are alone, surrounded by stillness. The silence is not empty. It is thick with presence, with a weight of centuries, with voices that no longer speak yet seem close at hand. You pause before a sealed doorway, its plaster marked with ancient seals. Behind it lies mystery. Will it ever be opened? Or will it remain forever closed, keeping its secret in trust with eternity? This balance of knowledge and mystery is part of Egypt's enduring power. We learn enough to be drawn close, but never enough to feel complete. The tombs, the mummies, the painted walls, the carved prayers, they speak, but only in fragments. What is missing is as compelling as what is found. For sleep, this mystery becomes almost a lullaby. To drift into rest is to mirror the Pharaoh's journey, wrapped in silence, guided by unseen hands, passing from one state into another. Just as the Egyptians prepared with linen, spells, and amulets, so too do we prepare with quiet, with stillness, with the turning away from the day. The ancient mysteries remain, not as puzzles to be solved in haste, but as companions on the gentle path toward night. And so, the story of Amenhotep I, his burial, his afterlife, and his memory leads us to a wider truth, that history is not always about answers. Sometimes, it is about questions left intentionally unanswered, about silences that invite reflection. It is about recognizing that we, too, are part of a cycle, temporary yet connected to eternity. When we picture ancient Egypt, our minds often leap toward the grand, golden thrones, elaborate tombs, and feasts in sprawling palaces. Yet beneath that shimmering image lay another, quieter reality, lived by farmers, craftsmen, and laborers who made up the majority of society. To understand Egypt as it truly was, we must hold both images side by side, the rarefied world of the elite and the steady endurance of the common people. Let us first step into the homes of the wealthy. Imagine walking through a spacious villa, surrounded by gardens filled with date palms, sycamores, and pools where lotus flowers float gently. The air carries the sound of water trickling from fountains, a luxury only the elite could enjoy in such an arid land. Walls are painted with bright scenes, banquets, musicians, servants carrying trays of figs, bread, and wine. Within, rooms are adorned with carved furniture, soft linens, and painted chests. Servants move quietly through corridors, tending to tasks unseen. The lady of the house might spend her morning supervising weaving or receiving guests, while the master discusses estate matters or attends to temple duties. Meals for the wealthy were plentiful and diverse. They enjoyed beef, lamb, and poultry, seasoned with herbs, along with fruits like pomegranates, grapes, and melons. Beer was common across all classes, but the elite savored wine, often imported or reserved for special occasions. At banquets, entertainment filled the air, harpists plucking gentle notes, dancers moving with grace, storytellers recounting tales of gods and kings. To be wealthy in Egypt was not only to be comfortable, but also to participate in a rhythm of life punctuated by leisure and display. Now, let us contrast this with the life of the common people. Picture instead a small mud brick home, sturdy yet modest, with a flat roof used for sleeping during hot nights. Inside, space is limited, a hearth for baking bread, a few jars for storing grain, simple mats for rest. Life here was ruled not by leisure, but by labor. The farmer rose with the sun, tending fields irrigated by the Nile's annual flood. Men sowed and harvested, while women ground grain into flour, baked bread, and brewed beer. Children helped where they could, caring for animals or fetching water. Food for the ordinary family was simpler: bread, beer, onions, lentils, fish caught from the river. Meat was rare, reserved for festivals or special gifts. Yet despite its simplicity, this diet was steady, nourishing, and familiar. In the evenings, families gathered together, eating from shared bowls, telling stories, and resting from the day's toil. And yet, for all the differences, there were threads that bound these two worlds. Both rich and poor shared devotion to the gods. Both looked to the Nile as the source of life. Both honored the turning of seasons and festivals. At temples, elite officials brought lavish offerings, while common folk lit small lamps or laid out a piece of bread. In festivals, boundaries blurred, as crowds mingled to celebrate with music, processions, and feasts that spilled into the streets. The gods belonged to all, and in those moments, the gap between palace and village seemed smaller. Still, the distinction was felt in daily rhythms. The wealthy could withdraw from toil, relying on servants, while the common people's survival hinged on the regularity of their own labor. The elite were remembered in tomb inscriptions, with painted walls proclaiming their status. Common folk, by contrast, often left only traces, shards of pottery, graffiti on limestone, fragments of tools. Yet in many ways, it was their endurance that kept Egypt alive, generation after generation, sustaining the very kingdom that the elite ruled and celebrated. For sleep, this contrast itself becomes soothing. Imagine moving slowly from one home to the other, from the cool, painted chambers of a villa to the warm, humble hearth of a mud brick dwelling. Both contain rhythms of life. Both echo with voices of families long gone, both now silent, preserved only in fragments. The grand villa may crumble into ruins, and the mud brick house may vanish into dust, yet their memory lingers together, two sides of the same story. As you picture these scenes, let yourself drift between them like the Nile itself, flowing calmly through rich fields and modest villages alike. The river did not discriminate. It watered both estates and farms, sustained both banquets and humble suppers. To listen to its steady current is to hear the unity beneath Egypt's divisions, a rhythm of life that continues, timeless and unhurried. In ancient Egypt, the line between elite and commoner was clear, yet life provided countless occasions where those lines blurred, softened by necessity or by ritual. To imagine this, picture the bustling atmosphere of a marketplace in Thebes or Memphis, where the scent of bread mingled with incense smoke and the murmur of bargaining voices filled the air. Here, noble officials might send their servants to purchase exotic oils or rare spices, yet they walked the same paths as farmers selling onions or fishermen offering their catch of the day. The marketplace was a space of overlap, where wealth and modest means brushed shoulders. Coins were rare. Most exchanges took the form of barter. A bundle of papyrus might be traded for fish or beer exchanged for woven cloth. Even the wealthy relied on these networks, for while their lives seemed removed from daily labor, they were still bound to the productivity of a land and the skill of artisans. The grand villa could not exist without the humble workshop. Festivals provided another layer of mingling. Imagine the annual celebrations of Opet in Thebes, when statues of the gods were carried in processions from temple to temple, accompanied by drums, singing, and dance. The entire city would join, priests in elaborate robes, officials in fine linen, and villagers from surrounding fields. Food and drink were shared, and the air filled with laughter, music, and chanting. For a moment, status mattered less than participation. Children of nobles and commoners alike might marvel at the same brightly painted boats gliding down the Nile, their sails adorned with gold and banners. Temples also served as crossroads. Grand complexes like Karnak were not only religious centers, but also places of employment, storage, and distribution. Farmers brought offerings of grain, while priests recorded them meticulously. Common people might enter courtyards, seeking blessings or healing, while elite patrons sponsored grand monuments. Both groups looked to the gods for protection, their prayers rising together, indistinguishable in the vast stone halls. Artisans, too, occupied a unique place in this web. Skilled craftsmen could ascend in status, gaining recognition and comfort unusual for their birth rank. Consider the village of Deir el-Medina, home to the workers who carved and decorated tombs in the Valley of Kings. Their homes were modest compared to noble estates, yet they enjoyed a degree of privilege, regular rations, literacy, and proximity to royal projects. Their artistry was valued by pharaohs themselves, bridging the gap between labor and elite recognition. Marriage and household service created further mingling. A servant in a wealthy home might come from humble origins, but gain stability, security, and even favor within that household. Some rose in influence, trusted advisors in domestic affairs. Likewise, scribes, though not always of noble birth, carried immense importance. Their ability to write, calculate, and record elevated them above ordinary laborers, granting a unique space in society. Despite these overlaps, the gulf remained, quietly felt in daily interactions. The elite might wear fine linen, scented with imported oils, while the common people wore rougher cloth and bore the marks of outdoor toil. Yet both groups lived within the same cycles: the flooding of the Nile, the heat of harvest, the coolness of evening when families rested. To walk through an Egyptian town at twilight, you would see lamps glowing in large villas and small huts alike, hear voices rising from courtyards rich and poor, and smell the same comforting aroma of baking bread carried on the air. In these moments, differences softened into a shared human experience. The dignity of survival, the joy of community, the reverence for the divine. These were threads woven into every level of Egyptian life. And just as the Nile united all with its steady current, so too did these rituals and spaces tie together worlds that otherwise seemed distant. As you imagine this balance, grand temples and humble markets, rich households and modest farms, let it settle into your thoughts like the slow settling of sand after a flood. Distinct layers exist, yet they rest gently atop one another, forming the foundation of a civilization both complex and deeply interconnected. In that layered stillness, you can drift deeper, following the rhythm of voices long faded into silence. When we look back across the centuries, the contrast between Egypt's elite and its common people can feel immense. Yet the passage of time has softened those differences. Tombs carved into cliffs still bear the names of nobles, their titles inscribed with care, while countless farmers remain nameless, their lives preserved only in traces: the shape of a plow, the imprint of a reed mat, or the faded graffiti of a laborer marking his presence. And yet, in the stillness of the desert, these distinctions fade. The wind moves across the ruins of palaces and villages alike, carrying the same fine sand into every hollow. Statues crumble, walls collapse, inscriptions were thin, but the memory of daily rhythms lingers. The Nile that once fed both villa and hut continues its steady course, indifferent to status, loyal only to the cycle of flood and retreat. For the elite, life was carefully designed to project permanence. They commissioned tombs filled with food offerings, clothing, and treasures meant to serve them in eternity. They imagined their names would endure, sung by priests and etched into stone. For the common people, memory was more fragile. A child's story passed from parent to parent, a handful of songs sung at harvest, laughter echoing in a courtyard on a cool evening. These were their monuments, no less meaningful, though less visible to history. If you picture these two legacies side by side, one is carved in stone and gold, the other woven in fleeting breath and laughter. Yet both belong to the same human story. The elite may have hoped to preserve eternity, but in the end, the survival of Egypt's grandeur depended on the millions of hands that toiled anonymously, sustaining harvests, building monuments, and keeping life's rhythm unbroken. The contrast is not only about wealth and poverty, it is about visibility and invisibility. Nobles appear in papyri, in reliefs, in tombs glowing with pigment. Farmers and craftsmen appear only indirectly, their work visible through what others claimed. But when archaeologists uncover the shards of cooking pots, the footprints of children in dried mud, or the faint remnants of bread ovens, it is as though those forgotten lives whisper again. They remind us that every society is made not only by the few who rule, but by the many who endure. Imagine yourself walking through a ruined site today. To one side, fragments of a once grand estate, columns broken, walls collapsed, painted plaster worn away. To the other, faint outlines of small houses, their walls barely rising above the ground. Both are silent now, equalized by centuries. Birds fly overhead, the desert breeze stirs gently, and the horizon stretches endlessly. In this stillness, the contrast between noble and common fades into a shared memory. an echo of a people who lived, worked, hoped, and dreamed beside the same river. As you let these images settle in your mind, there is comfort in recognizing the unity beneath the differences. Elite and common alike were bound by the rising of the sun, the flow of the Nile, and the certainty of nightfall. Both sought meaning in rituals, both cared for families, both carried burdens and joys. To reflect on their lives is to see ourselves mirrored in them, our own needs for food, rest, companionship, and hope. The past, then, is not only a record of grandeur or hardship, but also a gentle reminder that all lives, whether carved in stone or whispered in passing, contribute to the great fabric of history. And in that thought lies a soft reassurance that nothing lived is truly lost. The memory of ancient Egypt endures not because of one class or another, but because of the quiet harmony between them, preserved like a lullaby sung across millennia. So let us leave them here for now, these nobles and farmers, priests and potters. Their worlds were different, yet bound together. As the sands of Egypt continue to shift, their stories remain, calm and unhurried, waiting for us to listen. And as we prepare to close our journey, we carry with us the rhythm of their lives, steady and timeless, flowing into the stillness of night. And so, our long, unhurried walk through ancient Egypt comes to its end. We began with the quiet rhythms of daily life, picturing farmers and families whose routines mirrored the turning of the Nile. We paused with pharaohs and nobles, listening to the ambitions carved in a stone, then wandered through mysteries hidden in tombs, and finally reflected on the contrast between the powerful and the humble. Together, these voices created a harmony, a civilization that continues to speak across thousands of years. Yet now, as you rest, that harmony can fade gently into silence. The temples, markets, and fields dissolve into the stillness of your own room. The voices of workers and kings recede like the fading echo of footsteps in sand. All that remains is the steady current of time, calm and eternal, much like the Nile itself, flowing patiently under starlit skies. Imagine the desert at night, the air cooling after the heat of day, the horizon vast and quiet. Stars will slowly overhead, just as they did for those who lived and dreamed along the river. Palaces and huts alike are darkened, their people asleep, their lives folded gently into the rhythm of night. In that stillness, you too can find rest. The burdens of your day can be set down, the noise of your own world softened into calm. It is comforting to remember that even the mightiest pharaohs slept beneath the same stars, their power set aside at dusk, their voices hushed. The most humble farmers also closed their eyes at night, their work behind them until dawn. All were carried by the same cycle of waking and sleeping, labor and rest, life and silence. Tonight, you share in that same ancient rhythm. Let the weight of history ease you further into stillness. The details no longer need to be held. They can drift away like grains of sand carried by the breeze. There is nothing more to do, nowhere else to go, only the comfort of this present moment. You are safe, you are at rest, and the world can be quiet for a while. If these stories have helped you find calm, if the soft telling of history has brought you peace, you are welcome to return here anytime. You may like the video or subscribe, but only if it truly supports your rest. And if you wish, leave a gentle note in the comments. Share where you're listening from, or what hour of night finds you here. It is a quiet comfort to imagine a constellation of listeners scattered across the world, yet joined in stillness, letting these stories carry them towards sleep. Now, the journey is complete. The pharaohs return to their tombs, the Nile flows on without end, and the sands of Egypt settle into silence. Allow your own thoughts to soften, your breathing to slow, and your body to sink deeper into rest. Good night, dear listener. Sleep peacefully, and may the rhythm of history guide you gently into dreams.